There is a place on this planet where more undiscovered species live than anywhere else on Earth, and most of them want nothing to do with you. The Amazon rainforest spans over 2.1 million square miles across 9 countries. And inside that green ocean of trees is a world that has spent more than 55 million years quietly perfecting the art of killing. Not with claws the size of swords, not with roars that shake the ground, with silence, with patience, with chemistry so advanced that modern medicine still cannot fully replicate it. Every year, explorers, biologists, and indigenous hunters who have lived beside these animals their entire lives are reminded of the same lesson. The most dangerous predator in the Amazon is rarely the one you see first. It is the one you never see at all. A fish smaller than your finger has ended human lives in ways too disturbing to fully describe in detail. A creature the size of a matchstick delivers pain that has been compared, by the very scientists who study pain for a living, to being shot. And the animal that local river communities fear more than the jaguar is not a predator with teeth at all. It is something that swims beside you without a sound, and is often gone before you even know it was there. To understand why the Amazon produces creatures like this, you first have to understand what the Amazon actually is. It is not simply a forest. It is the single most biodiverse land ecosystem discovered on Earth, home to an estimated 10% of all known species on the planet. Packed into a river basin so vast that its main channel alone discharges more fresh water into the ocean than the next 7 largest rivers in the world combined. In a system that dense with life, competition for every advantage is relentless, and evolution has responded the only way it can. Not with bigger monsters, but with smarter, more efficient, more surgical ones. Every predator on today's list survived millions of years of that pressure by becoming exceptional at one specific, terrifying thing. Consider for a moment what that pressure actually looks like on the ground. A single hectare of Amazon rainforest, an area roughly the size of 2 football fields, can contain more tree species than the entirety of North America. Beneath that canopy exists an entire vertical world of competing life, from the emergent giants piercing the upper canopy at heights over 200 feet, down through the understory, and finally to the dark, damp forest floor where sunlight rarely penetrates at all. Every layer of that structure has produced its own specialists, its own ambush artists, its own chemists. The creatures on today's list were not selected because they are the loudest or the most photographed. They were selected because researchers, guides, and the indigenous communities who have called this rainforest home for thousands of years consistently identify them as the ones that inspire genuine, lasting caution, the kind of respect that outlives any single bad encounter and gets passed down as inherited wisdom. Today we are counting down the 5 most terrifying creatures the Amazon has ever produced, ranked not by size, but by how completely each one breaks the rules of what a predator is supposed to be. Some of them you have heard of. What you likely have not heard is exactly how each one kills. What researchers at institutions like the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, the Butantan Institute in Brazil, and the National Institute of Amazonian Research have discovered about the precise mechanics behind each attack, and why, after all this time, humans still have no reliable defense against several of them. Stay until the end, because the creature at number 1 is not the biggest, the fastest, or the most venomous animal on this list. It is, according to the people who have actually lived beside it for generations, the one thing in the entire rainforest they fear more than anything else that swims, crawls, or hunts in the dark. And once you understand why, you will never look at a quiet river the same way again. Before we begin, if you find yourself pulled into places most people will never see, this is exactly the kind of exploration this channel exists for. Consider joining the community in the comments below, because where we are headed next, you will want to be part of that conversation. This is our countdown of the 5 most terrifying creatures in the Amazon. Number 5. The golden poison dart frog. Along the Pacific coastal rainforests of Colombia, in a range so narrow it can be measured in a handful of square miles, lives an amphibian smaller than a human thumb that carries enough natural toxin to end the lives of 10 grown men, or, according to some toxicological estimates, as many as 20. It is not hidden in shadow, and it makes no attempt to conceal itself. Scientists know it as Philobates terribilis, and that species name is not an exaggeration for the camera. It means, quite literally, terrible or fearsome, and it was assigned by the very first researchers to formally describe it, because no other word in the scientific vocabulary quite captured what they were holding. Picture the scene the way a camera would find it. Bright, saturated yellow, or in some populations a pale mint green, sitting motionless on a wet leaf in broad daylight, utterly unbothered by anything moving nearby. Almost every other animal in the rainforest survives by blending into the shadows. This one does the opposite, and that is precisely the point. Herpetologists call this strategy aposematism, warning coloration so vivid and so unmistakable that predators learn, often after a single fatal mistake, never to try again. The golden poison frog does not need to run, hide, or fight. It only needs to be seen and remembered. The toxin responsible is called batrachotoxin, and it ranks among the most potent, naturally occurring poisons ever identified in any animal on Earth, land, or sea. Unlike venom, which is injected through a bite or sting, batrachotoxin is stored directly in the frog's skin and can be absorbed through any cut, scrape, or mucous membrane on contact. No puncture wound required at all. At the cellular level, the toxin permanently locks open the sodium channels in nerve and muscle cells, exactly the channels responsible for transmitting the electrical signals that keep a heart beating and lungs moving. Once those channels are jammed open, the signals never stop firing, and the result, researchers who study the compound explain, is uncontrolled. Catastrophic muscle contraction throughout the entire body, followed by cardiac arrest. There is, to this day, no known antidote. For the Embera people of Western Colombia, this frog is not simply a danger to avoid. It is a tool, refined over countless generations into one of the most effective hunting technologies the rainforest has ever produced. Hunters carefully rub the tips of blowgun darts against the frog's back, and a single frog, handled correctly, can coat enough darts to last for multiple hunting expeditions. The technique requires extraordinary care. Skilled hunters are known to hold the frog with a leaf or a stick, rather than bare skin, aware that even indirect, prolonged contact carries real risk. A dart tipped this way can bring down a monkey, a bird, or a small mammal high in the canopy within minutes, the toxin working through the bloodstream far faster than any blade or bullet. What makes the golden poison frog even more unsettling from a purely biological standpoint is where its toxin actually comes from. Researchers studying Philobates terribilis in captivity discovered something remarkable. Frogs, raised on a diet without access to specific wild ants, mites, and other small invertebrates found only in their native habitat, gradually lose their toxicity entirely, sometimes becoming almost completely harmless within a couple of generations. The frog does not manufacture its poison from scratch. It sequesters it, filtering and concentrating toxins from the specific insects it eats in the wild, meaning the terror of this animal is not really the frog itself. It is the entire food web beneath it, distilled into 2 inches of brilliant color. For an animal capable of killing 10 men, direct human fatalities are, remarkably, almost unheard of in the modern record, and researchers point to a simple explanation. The frog gives every possible warning before any contact is made. Its color is the warning. Its complete lack of fear is the warning. Indigenous communities who have lived beside it for generations do not fear it the way they fear an ambush predator, because it never ambushes anything. It simply exists, in plain sight, daring anything nearby to make the one mistake it will not get a chance to make twice. It is proof, right at the start of this list, that in the Amazon and the rainforests that border it, the animals that announce their danger openly can be just as lethal as the ones that hide it completely. Number 4. The Brazilian wandering spider. If the golden poison frog proves that a warning openly given can still be lethal, the Brazilian wandering spider proves that death does not need a warning at all, or a web. Unlike most dangerous spiders, which construct silk traps and wait patiently for prey to wander in, the genus Phonutria, a name that translates directly from ancient Greek as murderess, does not wait for anything. These spiders are active nocturnal hunters that roam the forest floor and low vegetation at night, covering significant ground in active pursuit of prey, which is exactly how they earned their common English name. Imagine the moment a headlamp beam sweeps across the forest floor at night and catches 2 reflective eyes among dozens of others, except this pair belongs to something with a leg span that can reach 5.5 inches, large enough to cover an outstretched human hand. Locals and researchers who have encountered the species in the wild describe a very specific and deliberately intimidating defensive posture. Front legs raised high off the ground, body lifted upward. Fangs fully exposed and visible, held perfectly still in what arachnologists describe as a calculated warning display. It is not the appearance alone that earned this spider a place in the Guinness World Records as the most venomous spider on Earth for well over a decade. It is what happens after the bite. The venom of Phonutria contains a complex cocktail of neurotoxins, most notably a compound identified by researchers as PHTX3, which floods the human nervous system with uncontrolled, cascading electrical signals. Victims report intense, burning pain radiating outward from the bite site within minutes, followed in more serious envenomations by profuse sweating, blurred or doubled vision, irregular and rapid heartbeat, and a symptom that has made this spider genuinely infamous in both medical literature and, unexpectedly, in pharmaceutical research circles. A prolonged, involuntary, and extremely painful erection in male victims, a condition known clinically as priapism, which can persist for hours and, left entirely untreated, can cause permanent tissue damage. This single side effect turned a feared killer into a subject of serious scientific fascination. Researchers at institutions, including the University of Arizona and pharmaceutical laboratories across Brazil, have spent years studying this exact toxin, not to avoid it, but to potentially harness it for medicine. Because a compound powerful enough to override human nervous system, signaling that precisely is, by definition, a compound with real pharmaceutical potential. Clinical research into isolating and adapting components of this venom to treat erectile dysfunction and related vascular conditions has been ongoing for well over a decade. An almost unbelievable twist for an animal that most people would only ever want to run from. What makes the Brazilian wandering spider especially dangerous in practical, everyday terms is not just its venom, but its habits. Unlike tarantulas and other reclusive species that remain deep in undisturbed forest, Phonutria has a well-documented tendency to seek shelter during daylight hours in dark, enclosed, human-adjacent spaces. Boots left outside overnight, piles of stacked clothing, stacked firewood near a camp, and, most notoriously of all, banana shipments. Between the 1990s and 2010s, multiple well-documented cases emerged across Europe and North America of live wandering spiders being discovered inside shipping crates of bananas exported from South America. Arriving in grocery stores thousands of miles from the rainforest they came from, an incident pattern so recognizable that it earned its own lasting nickname in international headlines: banana spiders. Field researchers who study Phonutria behavior in the wild describe the species as unusually confident compared to other large spiders, a trait that appears directly linked to its potent venom and its complete lack of natural predators as an adult. Where most spiders retreat immediately at the first sign of disturbance, wandering spiders have been observed holding their ground, tracking movement, with their front legs raised, and in some documented cases, actively advancing toward a perceived threat rather than fleeing from it. Arachnologists attribute this to a simple evolutionary calculation. An animal that can deliver a bite this dangerous has very little reason to run. There is also a seasonal dimension to the danger that many visitors never anticipate. Population studies conducted in southeastern Brazil have found that reported bite incidents spike noticeably during the region's warmer, wetter months, when both spider activity and human presence in rural and forest-adjacent areas increase simultaneously. Agricultural workers harvesting bananas and sugarcane by hand remain, according to public health records, among the occupational groups most frequently affected. A sobering reminder that for millions of people living and working at the edge of the Amazon, this is not an abstract documentary threat. It is an occupational hazard woven into daily life. According to toxicology and public health data compiled by Brazil's Ministry of Health, Phonutria bites account for a meaningful share of all serious arachnid envenomation cases reported annually across the country, and while antivenom developed and distributed by the Butantan Institute has dramatically reduced fatality rates since its widespread introduction, children and elderly individuals remain at significantly heightened risk of death from bites, particularly in cases where access to medical treatment is delayed by remote location or transportation difficulties. In a rainforest, where the nearest hospital can be hours, and in some regions, days away by riverboat, a bite from an animal that actively hunts, rather than passively waits, is not a remote statistical possibility confined to old records. It is a real and recurring danger for anyone who spends meaningful time near the forest floor after the sun goes down, which is exactly when Phonutria begins its nightly search. Number 3. The Green Anaconda. Wait for weight. Nothing in the Amazon commands more raw, primal dread than the Green Anaconda, Eunectes murinus, the heaviest snake species on the entire planet. While the reticulated python of Southeast Asia holds the world record for overall length, the Green Anaconda, which can exceed 20 feet and weigh over 550 pounds in the largest confirmed females, is built like nothing else in the animal kingdom, a creature so dense with muscle that a single adult can outweigh 4 grown men combined. Anacondas are pure ambush predators, and the Amazon's flooded forests, oxbow lakes, and slow-moving tributary rivers give them the perfect stage to disappear entirely. They spend the overwhelming majority of their lives fully submerged, with only their eyes and nostrils positioned unusually high on the skull, specifically for this purpose, breaking the surface of murky, sediment-choked water. Prey animals, from capybaras to caimans to deer that wander too close to the water's edge to drink, rarely, if ever, see the strike coming. And once an anaconda makes physical contact, it does not rely on venom at all. It relies entirely on physics. Constriction, as researchers at institutions including the University of Cincinnati have documented through direct pressure measurements taken on live snakes in controlled study conditions, does not work the way most people casually assume. Anacondas and other large constrictors do not crush their prey to death purely through blunt, bone-breaking force. They kill through what physiologists now describe as a form of controlled, escalating circulatory failure. With every single exhale from the captured prey animal, the snake tightens its coils further, matching and exceeding each breath, systematically closing the available space in the chest cavity until blood can no longer circulate effectively to the brain and heart. Unconsciousness and death, the same researchers found through direct measurement, can occur in under 60 seconds, not primarily from suffocation of the lungs as long assumed, but from acute cardiac arrest triggered by the total, sudden collapse of blood flow throughout the body. For most of recorded modern history, attacks on adult humans were considered exceptionally rare, largely because anacondas typically avoid attempting to subdue prey too large to realistically swallow afterward. But indigenous communities throughout the Amazon basin maintain long-standing oral histories, describing fatal encounters, particularly involving individuals swimming or wading alone through flooded, low-visibility waters near dusk, which happen to be exactly the conditions under which an anaconda cannot reliably distinguish a human silhouette from a capybara or a peccary moving through the same water. Herpetologists who study the species closely note that simple misidentification in poor visibility, rather than any deliberate predatory intent directed specifically at humans, is believed to be the primary factor behind the majority of documented serious encounters on record. There is also a seasonal rhythm to anaconda hunting that mirrors the Amazon's own dramatic transformation across the year. During the flood season, when rising rivers submerge vast stretches of forest floor and connect isolated lakes into a single sprawling waterway, anacondas gain access to hunting grounds and prey animals that are completely unreachable during the dry months. Biologists tracking radio-tagged individuals have documented significant increases in movement and feeding activity during these flooded periods, coinciding precisely with the months when local communities report the highest number of anaconda sightings near settlements, boat launches, and fishing areas. The snake is not becoming more aggressive during this window. It is simply going wherever the water, and the prey that follows it, happens to lead. Female green anacondas present an additional layer of danger, rarely discussed outside specialist literature. Unlike most snake species, female anacondas can grow dramatically larger than males, sometimes several times their mass, a phenomenon researchers attribute to the reproductive advantage of being able to produce larger, better provisioned litters of live young. This means the single largest, most physically capable individual encountered in any given stretch of river is, statistically, almost always going to be female, patient, established, and intimately familiar with every ambush point along her territory. What separates the green anaconda from nearly every other apex predator on this entire list is scale, combined with near-total invisibility. A 20-foot, 500-pound animal should, in theory, be almost impossible to hide from anyone paying attention. Yet, in the tea-colored, sediment-thick waters that define most of the Amazon and its countless tributaries, visibility can drop to mere inches in front of your own face. Meaning, an anaconda, large enough to comfortably swallow a full-grown deer, can be resting completely motionless, less than 3 feet from a swimmer, entirely undetected by sight, sound, or disturbance in the water. Local river guides across Brazil, Peru, and Colombia repeat an unspoken rule passed down across generations, one echoed so consistently across different communities that it has become almost folkloric in its authority. Never swim alone in still, murky water at dawn or dusk. In the Amazon, the largest snake on Earth does not need to chase anyone down. It only needs you to drift close enough on your own, and the water itself does the rest of the work. Number 2. The Black Caiman. At the very top of the Amazon's aquatic food chain sits a predator that has barely changed in tens of millions of years, and for very good evolutionary reason. It was already, functionally, perfect. The Black Caiman, Melanosuchus niger, is the largest predator anywhere in the entire Amazon basin, with confirmed modern specimens reaching over 16 feet in length. And credible historical accounts from the 19th and early 20th centuries describing individuals well beyond 20 feet, before large-scale commercial hunting dramatically reduced average adult sizes across the species' entire range. Unlike the American alligator, its far more docile North American cousin, the Black Caiman, is a true apex predator with virtually no natural check on its position at the top of its food web once it reaches full maturity. Juveniles fall prey to jaguars, anacondas, and larger, more established caimans, but a full-grown adult black caiman fears essentially nothing left in its environment. And remarkably, that includes, on documented occasions, the green anaconda itself, its closest rival on this very list. Researchers studying predator interactions across the Amazon basin have recorded and photographed genuine, documented instances of black caimans successfully preying on large anacondas, and anacondas in turn preying on caimans, a real, ongoing rivalry for the top of the food chain that plays out silently beneath the surface of rivers. Most tourists only ever glimpse from the safety of a boat deck. The black caiman's hunting method relies on one of the single most powerful bite forces ever measured in a living reptile anywhere on Earth. Studies conducted on caiman and closely related crocodilian species using calibrated bite force transducers have recorded pressures exceeding several thousand pounds per square inch in the largest individual animals tested. Among the strongest bite forces of any living animal, comparable to, and in some specific measurements exceeding, that of large crocodile species found elsewhere in the world, combined with a hunting strategy built entirely around patient ambush, remaining perfectly motionless at the water's surface, with only eyes and nostrils exposed, before exploding forward in an acceleration burst that outpaces the reaction time of nearly every prey animal it targets. The black caiman represents a predator, offering almost no margin for escape once physical contact is actually made. Night is when the black caiman becomes something else entirely. Researchers who have conducted spotlight surveys along Amazon tributaries describe the eerie experience of sweeping a light across seemingly calm water and finding it reflected back by dozens of pairs of glowing red eyes, evenly spaced along the surface, utterly motionless, each one attached to an animal capable of ending a confrontation in a single strike. These surveys, used by biologists to estimate population density, have inadvertently become one of the most visceral demonstrations of just how many apex predators can occupy a single stretch of river without a single visible ripple to give them away during the day. Local fishing communities have developed an intimate, almost instinctive understanding of caiman behavior passed down across generations, knowledge that often outperforms formal scientific survey data in predicting where and when encounters are most likely. Experienced guides describe reading subtle cues in water disturbance, the specific way reeds bend near the bank, even changes in bird activity near the shoreline, all developed through direct, lived proximity to an animal that offers no second warning once a strike begins. Conservationists estimate that unregulated commercial hide hunting throughout the 20th century, driven by strong international demand for exotic leather goods, drove black caiman populations down by an estimated 99% across some regions of the Amazon, before meaningful international protections were finally enacted during the 1970s and 1980s. The species has since rebounded significantly within protected reserves and enforcement zones, and with that ecological rebound has come a well-documented, measurable increase in human encounters. Wildlife biologists actively monitoring caiman populations across Brazil, Peru, and Ecuador have noted that as apex predator numbers recover toward historical baselines, so too does the ecological pressure they naturally exert on the surrounding environment, a genuinely necessary and positive process for a healthy, functioning rainforest ecosystem, but one that has quietly repositioned the black caiman as, once again, the single most feared aquatic predator among riverside communities who fish, bathe, and travel these same waters that these animals now confidently reclaim as their territory. For the people who live along the Amazon's rivers, the return of the black caiman is, without question, a genuine conservation success story worth celebrating. It is also, undeniably and simultaneously, the return of the single most powerful set of jaws found anywhere in South America. Number 1. The candiru. Everything on this list so far has relied on size, raw strength, potent venom, or overwhelming predatory power. The creature that ranks number 1 has almost none of those advantages. And that is exactly why it terrifies people who have spent their entire lives living alongside jaguars, caimans, and anacondas without a second thought. The candiru is a small, slender, nearly translucent catfish found throughout the Amazon basin, typically only a few inches in length, thin enough in some species to be almost invisible in silty, moving water. It has no venom whatsoever. It cannot crush bone. It could not overpower a house cat in a direct confrontation. And yet, according to countless generations of indigenous oral tradition passed down throughout the Amazon, it is the one single animal in the entire rainforest that local river communities fear more than any other predator on this entire list. More than the anaconda, more than the black caiman, more than anything with teeth or venom at all. The reason lies in the candiru's natural biological behavior. In the wild, this fish is a specialized parasitic feeder, evolved specifically to detect the gill flow of larger host fish and swim directly into the gill chamber, where it feeds briefly on blood before detaching and swimming away. It is a highly specific, deeply evolved behavior, refined over millions of years, that targets one very particular anatomical structure found on other fish. The deep, widespread cultural terror surrounding the candiru comes from long-standing regional folklore, claiming that this same evolved instinct can, under very specific circumstances, redirect toward human bathers in the water, drawn in by a similar sensory signal with catastrophic and deeply disturbing consequences once the fish becomes lodged in place. Its small, backward-facing spines, making removal without emergency surgical intervention nearly impossible, according to the handful of case reports on record. It is important, in the interest of documentary accuracy, to state clearly and honestly what the actual scientific record actually shows. Verified, medically documented cases of this exact worst-case scenario occurring in humans are exceptionally rare. Ichthyologists who have formally studied the species, including researchers who have published findings in peer-reviewed journals examining the candiru's specific sensory biology and chemical attraction cues, note that the fish's attraction mechanism appears highly specific to fish gill chemistry rather than human anatomy, and that the small handful of historical human case reports remain genuinely disputed within the broader scientific community regarding whether they were accurately observed and documented at the time they were originally recorded. What is not disputed, however, is the sheer cultural and psychological weight this small fish carries across an enormous region. Along rivers throughout Brazil, Peru, and Colombia, generations of parents have passed down urgent warnings about the candiru to their children, and it remains, to this very day, one of the primary reasons many local communities actively avoid urinating in the river and take specific, deliberate precautions, including specially designed protective garments before swimming in certain stretches of water. The folklore surrounding the candiru is not a recent invention shaped by internet-era exaggeration. European naturalists, traveling through the Amazon as far back as the 19th century, recorded local warnings about the fish in their own journals and correspondence, describing it as one of the very first things guides and river communities warned outsiders about, often before mentioning jaguars, caimans, or snakes at all. That the warning has survived largely unchanged across roughly 2 centuries of written record, passed down through generations of oral tradition long before that, speaks to just how deeply this small fish is embedded in the psychological landscape of the river, regardless of exactly how often, or how rarely, the worst-case scenario has actually occurred. Ichthyologists studying the broader Trichomycteridae family, to which the candiru belongs, note something else worth sitting with. This is a fish that has evolved an extraordinarily specific, almost surgical relationship with the anatomy of other animals, a level of biological precision that took millions of years to refine. Whether or not that precision has ever truly been misdirected toward a human being in the exact way the legends describe, the fact that evolution produced an animal capable of that kind of targeted, the parasitic exactness at all, is, on its own, one of the more unsettling realities the Amazon has to offer. Folklore aside. And this is precisely why the Candiru belongs at number 1, and why it fundamentally reframes everything you have just learned across this entire countdown. This whole video has moved steadily through bigger, stronger, more venomous, more powerful animals, each one seemingly more dangerous and more physically imposing than the last. But the single creature that indigenous communities fear the most, after living directly alongside jaguars, anacondas, and caimans for many thousands of years of accumulated, hard-won experience, is not the biggest thing swimming in the water. It is the smallest, quietest, most unassuming animal on this entire list. A fish most people could comfortably hold in one closed hand. In the Amazon, real fear was never actually about size, raw strength, or visible teeth. It has always, at its core, been about the unknown, about what you genuinely cannot see coming, and about how little actual control you have the moment you step into water that has spent 55 million years quietly learning exactly how to hide its most effective predators in plain sight, right beneath the surface. So there they are, the 5 creatures that transform the Amazon from a breathtaking, photogenic wilderness into one of the most psychologically demanding environments found anywhere on Earth. A tiny, brilliantly colored frog that carries enough poison in its skin to end 10 lives and never once has to hide. A hunting spider bold enough to travel the world hidden inside fruit crates. A snake heavy enough to outweigh a compact car, rendered completely invisible in 3 inches of murky water. A set of jaws powerful enough to have outlasted the age of the dinosaurs and every mass extinction since. And a fish small enough to disappear between your fingers, feared more by the people who actually live there than any other predator on this entire list. What connects every single one of these 5 very different animals is not size, and it is not violence for its own sake. It is precision. 55 million years of evolutionary pressure inside the single most biodiverse ecosystem on the planet has not produced the biggest possible predators. It has produced the most exact ones, animals that do only what they specifically need to do, using only the precise amount of force, chemistry, or stealth required, and nothing more than that. That, more than any single fact in this video, should genuinely unsettle you. Not the sheer size of the Amazon's monsters, but their extraordinary efficiency. There is one more thing worth sitting with before you go. Every single animal on this list, from the smallest frog to the largest caiman, has existed in this exact ecological role for millions of years, without ever driving its prey, its rivals, or the ecosystem around it to collapse. That is not an accident. It is balance, built through an almost incomprehensible span of evolutionary time, where every predator's power is matched, checked, and constrained by the pressures of everything else living around it. Humans have occupied the Amazon for a comparatively brief moment in that timeline, and the choices made in the coming decades, about deforestation, about hunting, about how these rivers and forests are treated, will determine whether that ancient balance survives into the next century at all. The creatures that terrify us are also, in a very real sense, the ones keeping the entire system honest. Which of these 5 surprised you the most? Was it the fish at number 1? Or did you already know its reputation before today? Tell us in the comments below. And if you have ever personally set foot in the Amazon yourself, we genuinely want to hear that story too. Because the people who have actually been there always have the details no documentary can fully capture. If this journey into the rainforest's most feared residents pulled you all the way in, make sure you are subscribed and that notifications are turned on. Because next time, we are going somewhere very few outsiders have ever been allowed to go. And what researchers found there is still, even now, being kept largely out of public view. Until then, stay curious. And remember, the most dangerous thing in the Amazon is almost never the one you see first.